Okay, folks. So, yeah, welcome back to week 7 of the Journey and the Guide. So, what we'll be doing this morning is, first of all, we'll be meditating, and then we'll have our home groups, and after which we'll have a break, and then we'll have a few questions and answers, and then we'll explore this new theme for the next 2 weeks, which is spiritual rebirth, and we'll set up our home practice for this week at the end. So yeah, first just a few little words about meditation. With integration, in terms of meditation, what that means in terms of meditation is the drawing together of the different energies of the mind. So as we become more integrated, we become more able to concentrate, and with that becomes a clarity of thought, and also I think a kind of richness of thought. You might have noticed this, that you're thinking through the course of the meditation. You probably notice this most strikingly after the meditation. It's like your thinking is kind of enriched. You might find that your mind becomes kind of more fertile after you've meditated. Obviously, when you're meditating, when you're doing something like the mindfulness of breathing, you're not trying to actively think about things. But when you re-enter reflection and thought afterwards, you might notice that it's kind of richer. There's more clarity. You're more able to think creatively. And then in terms of positive emotion, one of the things that we're really trying to do with positive emotion in terms of meditation, particularly through the practice of the metta bhavana, is develop our imagination, in the sense of our ability to enter into the experience of another person through imagination. So this, of course, is a really important, characteristic of a human mind, is that we're able to do that. We're able to imagine, and really, I think what we're trying to do in positive emotion is, it's almost like we're trying to purify our imagination, our ability to produce stories and images and narratives and so on. So if we're in a negative mental state, that capacity to imagine becomes kind of hijacked, and it becomes out of control. And we all know what that's like when there's a narrative or a story running in our mind that feels like it's kind of using us, that we're being, it feels like being kind of hijacked, like there's terrorists in the cockpit, as it were. So we're trying to purify that ability to imagine so that it becomes genuinely creative and a source of empathy rather than a source of resentment. And also, we're trying to purify that ability to imagine from a constant self-reference. So we're trying to let go of that constant self-reference in terms of the way that we think and talk about ourselves in our own mind. So very often we just keep coming back to ourselves, our sort of vanity and pride and arrogance even. So we're trying to see other people's perspectives and other people, even just to know that they have experience. So particularly in spiritual death, we're really trying to see through that sort of constant self-referencing. We're really trying to see that there isn't actually anything fixed there that self-referencing refers to, that it's a flow. So we've been exploring that over the last couple of weeks. And when we engage with that, often we do feel a sort of prick of shock or discomfort or uneasiness when we start investigating what's really going on. So if you do feel that, in a way, it's quite natural. Often I find with the Dharma, there's both a sense of inspiration and also a slight kind of flinching, a little bit like jumping into cold water. It kind of wakens you up, but it's a bit of a shock to the system, as well as the kind of inspiration that you kind of get both. You get a bit of a shock, a bit of a shock. So spiritual rebirth is the next stage, and this is what comes in when on the basis of the integration of positive emotion and the letting go that comes with spiritual death. So it's not that you're letting go into a vacuum, you're letting go into a sense of there being something more. So again, it's kind of like, again, imagination is important. You start engaging with and imagining what you could grow into, or the potential within your own mind, you could put it like that. So this is the inspiration part of it. The spiritual death is a bit like, you know, the cold water. The spiritual rebirth is the refreshment that comes when you start relaxing into the cold water, and you feel the refreshing invigoration of it. I'm particularly thinking of like mountain streams on a hot day here, and very hot day even. How, yeah, that kind of refreshing sense of being bathed in cold water. So yeah, so I'll say more about imagination later, but I just wanted to sort of just to set up the meditation. So what we're going to do is we're going to do a little bit of mindfulness of breathing. We're just going to just begin to let our mind settle and become more whole, more together. And then I'm just going to throw in a few questions, which is just to sort of imagine a different way of being. And we'll see what comes of that. So yeah, so if you want to set yourself up for meditation, we'll make a start when everybody's ready. So taking the time you need to establish your posture. And having a sense of letting go into what's going on. And first of all, just letting go into what's going on, or even just where you are, just the place that you're in. So being in the room, feeling the containment of the space. Noticing sound. Noticing the way that sound comes and goes, in the same way that thoughts come and go. So then beginning to notice your thoughts and the content of your thoughts. Having a sense of the vitality or lack of vitality in your thoughts and your mind. Does your mind feel kind of dull or sleepy or tense? Does it feel fertile, alive, relaxed? And just being curious and non-judgmental. In other words, just being open to that, to what's there, without immediately jumping on it as being good or bad. And beginning to tune into the body. And again, looking for that experience of letting go in the body. So with awareness comes ease. So beginning by being aware of the face, the forehead, and the eyes, the mouth and the jaw, the scalp, the neck, feeling the brain within, the sinuses and nasal passages, the ears, the eyes, the inside of the mouth, the tongue, again the neck, a sense of how you're holding your neck, the shoulders and the arms, the hands. So surrendering the weight of your arms to their support. The chest, the armpits, the upper back. The middle part of the trunk around the base of the rib cage. the waist, the belly, the lower back, pelvis, the genitals, the lower belly, the buttocks. So feeling these parts as sensation, not as image, but as sensation. The upper legs and the knees, the lower legs and the feet. So feeling the whole of your self with all its different strands of experience. So there's your sense of being in a particular place, your thinking, your emotion, the sensations of your body. And trying to let go of a sense of it being yours. It's just experience. So rather than thinking of my experience of being in a place, my thoughts, my emotions, my body, just thinking of it as being in a place. There being thoughts arising, there being emotions arising, and sensations arising in the body. So you don't even need to think of a sense of a self doing the practice. What there is an engagement, a desire to engage, which is an expression of a deep held desire for freedom, for happiness, for satisfaction and fulfillment. As we begin to engage with what our body does as we breathe. And placing a count at the end of the out breath without narrowing. So try not to narrow or limit with the counting. So mindfulness of breathing, counting at the end of the out breath. Moving now into the second stage, placing the count just before the in-breath. In the third stage, letting go of the counting and just being with your breathing. So you're just allowing awareness to deepen. Letting go of what's impeding that. attending to the sensations where you first feel the breath entering your body. Just sitting. And then I'd like to invite you to imagine what it would be like to experience complete contentment, to be just here and completely contained, completely happy, completely contented with just this. That would mean freedom from craving, peace, it would mean the ability to enjoy pleasure without clutching at it, clinging onto it, wishing it would continue forever. Imagine what it would be like to be in a state of metta all the time, completely unshakable metta. A state of overflowing goodwill. A state free from the tendency to create hatred from unpleasant experiences. The ability to withstand painful experiences with love and equanimity, joy and compassion. And what would it be like to just know and see and feel things as they really are, with complete clarity, free from delusion, confusion, fear. So this contentment, love, and clarity is the state of the Buddha. The Buddha who's made of the same stuff that we are made from. And I'm just going to conclude the practice just by chanting a mantra of the Buddha, or the mantra of the Buddha, which is an evocation of these qualities in sound. Muni, Muni, Maha Muni, Shakya Muni, Sadhu Muni, Muni, Maha Muni, Shakya Muni, Sadhu Muni, Muni, Maha Muni, Shakya Muni, Okay, folks, so we'll kick off. So we've got a couple of questions. One from Francis. Can one do anything practice-wise to remove or loosen the grip of a recurring theme? I find that sometimes I can put my own needs last behind others' needs. I find it hard to take care of others without sacrificing caring for myself. So there's kind of two questions there. The first one, can one do anything practice-wise to remove or loosen the grip of a recurring theme? In a way, the whole of Buddhist practice is about that. We get stuck in these patterns. So yeah, the image that's often given for that in the tradition is wheel. We're like stuck on a wheel, the wheel of becoming. We keep becoming in the same way. So you might be familiar with the image of the wheel of life. The word is actually Bhava Chakra. Bhava means becoming. So it's like we re-become in the same way. We keep creating ourselves in the same way. So one of the reasons that we do those reporting in groups is one way of loosening the grip of a recurring theme is to talk about it, to externalize it. So that helps us to get a bit of objectivity on what's going on and to get a bit clearer about what's happening. And even in the act of articulating it, we might even begin to find a little point of freedom. So that's what we're looking for, is those little points of freedom where we start getting a sense of how we might loosen the grip of that recurring theme of that cycle. So it's almost like we need to develop a kind of sense of noticing those openings, noticing the kind of space that opens up when there's a sort of a loosening of the grip. But really, the whole of Buddhist practice, ethics, meditation, wisdom, integration, positive emotion, the whole lot is trying to loosen that grip. I might say something more about that later, actually. I find that sometimes I can put my own needs last behind others' needs. I find it hard to take care of others without sacrificing caring for myself. So this sort of reminds me of the whole area of metta, of self-metta. And one way that it can help, that if you is to look after yourself for others. So rather than, I think often what we do is we create a kind of a dichotomy or a separation between now I'm helping myself and now I'm helping others. Sometimes what I find helpful is thinking, well, I'm taking care of myself so that I'll be better resourced to look after others or to care for others or to help others. So if I'm running ragged, if I'm exhausted and so on, I'm not going to be much good to people. But if I'm inspired and energetic and happy, I'll more help. I've benefit to other people. So I try and think of it that way around. If I'm having difficulty looking after myself, that I need to look after myself in order to help others. So I'm sitting here having a cup of tea, relaxing for the benefit of all beings. Sometimes I sort of say that to myself. It sounds a bit comical, maybe, but just saying for the benefit of all beings can sometimes make a difference. So I hope that helps. It's just a way of kind of slightly reframing the way we're thinking. So again, I think that's part of what the Dharma is trying to do is we just come at things from a different angle. We're always coming at things from a particular angle. And what the Dharma is offering is a different angle, a different way of looking at things. It helps to break up the patterns that we're in. Another question: in what ways can meditation change one's personality? And do you have any thoughts on transcendental meditation? In what way can meditation change one's personality? Well, I think you can distinguish, I think, between like your particular kind of character. Like you've got a particular makeup as a human being. And then you've got what goes on within that makeup. So I think it's important to recognize that in some ways, through practice, through developing the stages of the path, your in a way, your personality doesn't change. You've got a particular kind of shape, which is, one of the things that makes life so fascinating, is that we're all so different. So it's not that we're all becoming more the same. In some ways, we become more ourselves. Our character kind of changes. So the particular patterns within our being, in terms of the kind of patterns I was just mentioning, reactive patterns, negative patterns, unskillful patterns, that they begin to diminish, and creative patterns begin to develop. So we actually become more like ourselves, because, developing these stages of the path help us to do that. We become more of who we really could be. There's a famous sutra, and the Buddha says that the Dharma is like a great rain cloud that pours rain copious over the whole earth, and all the different plants grow according to their own species. So apple trees grow into apple trees, and rice grows into rice, and wheat grows into wheat. They're all sustained by the same rain, but they all grow into their own particular species. So it says that the sutra says the Dharma is like that in terms of human beings. So each human being grows according to his or her own personality, their own particular shape, but they grow more fully into that. So hopefully that answers the question. I don't really have any thoughts on transcendental meditation. I've never done it, so it's a bit hard for me to comment. I suppose I'm a bit suspicious of something that, what I've heard about transcendental meditation is that it sort of says, well, you just do it twice a day for 20 minutes and that's all you need to do. And I suppose that's different from a Buddhist approach, where it's much more like you need to bring awareness and kindness into all the different aspects of your life. It's not just about doing a particular technique, although meditation is a profoundly transformative practice. So that's the only thought I have, really. Hey Nyanadara, was wondering how you've been consistent over the years meditating and going for refuge in the 3 jewels. How? I think I'm wondering how you've been consistent. I think I've been consistent in as much as I've followed the advice of my teacher and teachers. That's what's enabled me to be consistent, like, doing the things that the Buddhist tradition and my teacher and our teachers kind of advise, like, going on retreats regularly. That's really important for maintaining a consistent going for refuge. Keeping in good contact with friends. I mean, one of the things that Maitreya Bandhu says in the book, which I think is really brilliant, actually, it hit me when I first looked at it, was he says, make friends and stay friends. So I think that's helped me as well, is just keeping particular connections alive with friends and really maintaining them, and trying to go deeper with the communication. I mean, I could do more of that, but I think that's been really important in terms of being consistent of those friendships and that communication. Studying the Dharma, I mean, I kind of like doing that anyway, but just keeping refreshing that perspective. I'm in a study group. I feel that a few of the lads actually that are in it are here in the course. We do it every Monday. We do study, and just keeping on refreshing that Dharma perspective and with friends. It's a really, really excellent way of maintaining commitment. Meditating every day. I more or less meditate every day. So that's important as well to me. Those are the things that kind of, actually, one other aspect is taking responsibility for other people, in the sense that taking responsibility for creating the conditions for other people to be able to gain access to the Dharma and to practice the Dharma. So even just in the group we had there before the break, because Daniel's away, I was in the group that he's usually in, and just listening to everybody, I was really inspired by just hearing the effect that the Dharma has on people. So So, while I've been involved with creating the conditions for this course, I also benefit from just hearing other people's experience of practicing and seeing that it really does have an effect on people. So that inspires me to keep going. So I could keep talking actually in that vein, but yeah, those are some of the key things. Yeah, the thing about taking responsibility. So if you're responsible for creating conditions for other people to gain access to the Dharma, it's not just about you anymore. So you can't kind of wriggle out of it quite so easily. So like this morning, in a way, I feel a bit more energetic now, but I felt really tired this morning coming and doing this course. Felt like a bit of an effort. But now that I've been, doing it for an hour and a half, I feel quite buoyed up by it. So if I didn't have to come this morning, I probably wouldn't have, if you see what I mean. But because I'm, teaching it, I have to come. So sometimes, in a way, painting yourself into a corner in terms of having to turn up for something can be a real advantage because you've got to sort of step up to the plate, so to speak. Hi, Nyanadara. Are those reflections that you did at the end of the meditation today in the book? They were very inspiring. Thanks. No, they weren't. It's quite a simple idea. I mean, I was just taking the idea of greed, hatred, and delusion. So it said that the Buddha is free from greed, hatred, and delusion. So I suppose that the gist of the reflection was just, well, what would it be like to experience life free from greed, free from hatred, and free from delusion? And just actually spending a bit of time reflecting on that, imagining what that would be like. So in a sense, that's what we're doing when we bring to mind the Buddha. We're imagining, well, what would that be like to be awakened? Like according to the tradition, we're made of the same stuff that the Buddha was made from. We're human beings. He was a human being. So, we've got we have that potential within us. So what would it be like to not get pissed off, or to not hold grudges, to not get kind of hanker after things and get really attached? And what would it be like to not be confused about what we should do with our life? I mean, that's what the tradition's saying is possible. I mean, so just, it's just an invitation to imagine what that would be like. So that's really the gist of it. I mean, I don't think that's in the book. I might have picked it up sort of subliminally. Paul, hi Nyanadara. During our breakout group, our group leader mentioned the positive benefit of retreats. Are there plans in future to restart these? Absolutely. We'll start doing retreats when we can. There's no doubt about that. In the interim, what we're going to do actually is we're going to have an online retreat. So we're going to try and replicate as many of the conditions as possible that we would have on a retreat, but we're going to do it on Zoom. And we're going to do that in conjunction with the London Buddhist Centre. So I can actually tell you the dates of that retreat. They're going to be from the 2nd to the 9th of August. So yeah, watch the space for more details. But I'm really excited about that. And there'll be teaching at different levels. So it'll be an introductory retreat. There'll be teaching for people who've been around a bit longer. So I'm hoping that our whole Sangha in Dublin can, and I shouldn't say in Dublin anymore, I should say in Ireland, can participate in that retreat. So yeah, that's coming up the 2nd to the 9th of August. Yeah, thanks for the questions. I hope the answers were adequate to the question. If they weren't, you can hang around at the end and I'll still be kicking around. So to introduce this theme, I wanted to actually read a poem, and it's a poem that's in the book. It's quite a famous poem. It's by Ted Hughes, the British poet. It's called The Thought Fox. I imagine this midnight's moment's forest. Something else is alive beside the clock's loneliness and this blank page where my fingers move. Through the window I see no star. Something more near, though deeper within darkness, is entering the loneliness. Cold, delicately as the dark snow, a fox's nose touches twig, leaf. Two eyes serve a moment that now and again now and now and now sets neat prints into the snow between trees, and warily a lame shadow lags by stump and in hollow of a body that is bold to come across clearings, an eye, a widening, deepening greenness, brilliantly, concentratedly, coming about its own business, till, with a sudden sharp hot stink of fox, it enters the dark hole of the head. The window is starless still. The clock ticks. The page is printed. So the poem talks about this encounter with a fox, a kind of, I don't even want to say an imaginative encounter. It sounds almost like a kind of mystical encounter. So this poem apparently arose. Ted Hughes was studying, I think it was in Cambridge or Oxford, one of the two, studying English and writing some kind of an abstract piece about literature. He was writing about literature. And he had this kind of encounter with this bloodied, burnt fox. And the fox said to Ted, he said, "You're killing us." So basically he was writing this analytical piece, then he was finding it very, very difficult to write. And then he had this encounter with this fox, this animal. So what it suggests is that, in a way, that Ted Hughes's exercise of his will was becoming kind of destructive, and something else had to come in that wasn't from him. So this is really what spiritual rebirth is about. It's about the entry into our life of something that goes beyond our own kind of egoistic clinging and egoistic demanding and egoistic desiring and egoistic self-centeredness. Something else actually enters into our life. And the creative process is probably a really good metaphor for us. It's much more appealing to modern people than sort of religious metaphors. But in a sense, it's something religious, because that we encounter some kind of reality beyond the confines of what we think of ourselves. So in that sense, it's religious, you could say. So really what we're doing in the stage of spiritual rebirth, having cleared a space, we're opening ourselves up to something to come in that's outside of us. So that's a little bit, you were asking that question earlier, Francis, about how do you let go of patterns. I'm just going to see how you put it. Loosen the grip of a recurring theme. Loosen the grip of a recurring theme. So this is one way that we do that, is we just reach out to something that's completely beyond us altogether. So that's what, and to try and find a kind of connection, a kind of spark of connection. So it's interesting when you're asking about that reflection. So that might be the connection for you. When we did that reflection after the meditation, in a way, I was inviting a reflection on the Buddha, and how if that sparked something off for you, that might be a way for you to enter into a relationship with something that kind of, as it were, goes beyond yourself. And also I recited the mantra of the Buddha, Muni Muni Maha Muni Shakyamuni Sadhu. So that is another way of doing that. That might have sparked something off in you. It might not have. But if it did, that might be another way that you could develop that kind of connection or that kind of relationship with the Buddha, that reality that both is beyond you, but also that you have an affinity with. So this is the wonderful thing about the Buddhist attitude towards the goal, is that it's other than us, we're not awakened. But at the same time, it's intimate with us because the Buddha was a human being and we're a human being. We can make that transition to awakening. So that's a really inspiring thing about Buddhism, is that the goal and the ultimate in the universe is something that we have a deep affinity with. It's not other than us. There's no ultimate separation. And we bridge that gap by practicing integration, positive emotion, spiritual death, and spiritual rebirth. So it's interesting that after Ted has the encounter with the fox, so at the beginning, you have this, he says, I imagine this midnight moment's forest. So you got the image of a forest. Something else is alive. So it's not just him. He feels the presence of something else or someone else besides the clock's loneliness. The clock, of course, represents time, the passage of time. So it's even something else apart from time, the passage of time. So again, we often feel this, that we have some kind of a sense that there's something going on that's not subject to, day after day, hour after hour, minute after minute. There's some other kind of reality that we're participating in. And this is embodied in this poem by the fox. So he says, beside the clock's loneliness and this blank page where my fingers move. So he's writing. And at the end of the poem, after the encounter, still with a sudden sharp hot stink of fox, it enters the dark hole of the head. The window is starless still, the clock ticks, the page is printed. So something's happened, that something's come onto the page. So that encounter that's happened outside of time has brought something into time that's been expressed through a piece of writing. So again, what happens is when we encounter something of this kind, something that's beyond ego clinging, it then informs and inspires and motivates the activity that we're doing within time. So you get this kind of idea a lot in Buddhism, this idea of, that those timeless realities coming into the flow of time and being expressed. And that really is what, what our practice is. It's a way of expressing timeless realities within the flow of time. We have to participate in the flow of time. We have to turn up to, the Zoom room at 10:30 on a Saturday in order to participate in the course. But hopefully through engaging with the course, through meeting each other, through doing the meditation, through listening to the topics and allowing them to sort of soak into us, we touch something that's not anything to do with it being 10:30 on a Saturday morning, if you see what I mean. So I'm just trying to evoke a particular kind of quality here, and a particularly important aspect of human life. I think it's become problematic because we live in a world, a kind of post-God world, really. For a lot of us, the idea of God is not just, it's not just seems delusional, but also seems positively harmful. So we don't want anything to do with the notion of God. We've seen even the horrors that have come from a very literal interpretation of that kind of idea or expression of that idea. But at the same time, there's something within us as human beings that knows that there is something more to life than just us, than just me on my own, being me, and either getting my way or not getting my way. There must be something beyond that. So I think this is why Buddhism is so important in the modern world, because it offers a perspective of something that's not materialistic, that doesn't just say all there is matter and when you die that's it, but that is amenable to reason, that you can actually investigate and not just with reason, and see what happens when you put it into practice in your experience. And that also honors the fact that we do know as human beings that there is something beyond us as individuals, and that we can be in relation to that. We can actually bring that into being more and more fully. And this is what's going on in this. So what you have is a kind of dynamic between integration of positive emotion and spiritual death and spiritual rebirth. So the spiritual death and rebirth kind of informs the way that our integration of positive emotion unfolds. So we do, in other words, initially, we kind of like, we exercise our will to get to move in a particular direction. And then that will becomes more and more sort of permeable, more and more porous. And then something can come into that will from outside that then sort of refines the direction that our will is moving in. So we're trying to kind of play with this dynamic between will and the surrender of will, if you see what I mean. It's quite a tricky area, and in a way, it's quite difficult to talk about, which is why I started by just reading a poem to try and sort of evoke something, because that's what it is. And when you're talking about this, when you're talking about the area of spiritual rebirth, particularly spiritual rebirth and spiritual death to a lesser extent, you can only use metaphorical language. And part of the reason for that is one of the mistakes we make is we take things literally. So, for example, we know that there's something beyond us, and then we kind of literalize that into this, man with a beard who lives in the sky who makes everything happen. We've turned a deep human experience into a kind of literalized constraint. And that's why we need to realize and need to recognize that whenever we talk about this area of spiritual rebirth, we're using metaphorical language, we're using symbols. So that's what this, obviously this is not the Buddha, it's a statue of the Buddha, but yet it expresses something about something that's true, that it's expressing, the image is expressing the possibility of awakening for human beings. So I'll just read that poem one more time, and then we'll see if there's any questions, and then we'll move on. The Thought Fox by Ted Hughes. I imagine this midnight's moment's forest. Something else is alive beside the clock's loneliness and this blank page where my fingers move. Through the window I see no star. Something more near, though deeper within darkness, is entering the loneliness. Cold, delicately as the dark snow, a fox's nose touches twig, leaf. Two eyes serve a moment that now and again, now and now and now, set neat prints into the snow between trees, and warily a lame shadow lags by stump and in hollow of a body that is bold to come across clearings, an eye, a widening, deepening greenness, brilliantly, concentratedly, coming about its own business, till, with a sudden, sharp, hot stink of fox, it enters the dark hole of the head. The window is starless still. The clock ticks. The page is printed. So I'll just see if there are any questions. So on your, is that mantra in the book? It's not. If you hang around afterwards, I can put it in the chat. This question may be controversial, but it refers to the violence of Buddhist monks in Myanmar. What could possibly motivate an individual who has supposedly dedicated their life to integration to act in a way that is so contrary to the ideal of the Dharma? Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, I think my response to that question is that if you act in that way, I mean, I actually saw an image which I found deeply shocking of a Buddhist monk in robes and two other men basically beating someone to death. I saw it. It was one of the most shocking things I've seen for a while. So basically, I would conclude that if you're acting in that way, you're not dedicated to integration. So, you know, you might have the outward appearance of a Buddhist, but there's no inner commitment to the ideals of Buddhism. So you get that in any religious tradition, really, that you get the kind of outer trappings, but without the actual commitment, which is the real thing, you know. So yeah, I don't think I can say much more than that. Maybe yeah, that's the point I was going to make, is that really what Buddhism is about the way you live. It's what you do. It's not really about how you present yourself. You know, whether you wear robes or whether you shave your head or whether you don't, or whether you wear yellow robes or red robes, or, you know, whether you do this particular kind of chanting or that particular kind of chanting, or it's not really about that's secondary to the inner commitment that you're making. Like in the Buddhist day, they didn't have any of that. You know, you just had people who listened to the Buddha and followed his teaching. But it does make one reflect. You know, how can it go so badly wrong that you get people? I mean, I saw a video again of a Buddhist monk sitting in robe with a shaven head, with a big Dhamma chakra, you know, the symbol of Buddhism carved into wood behind him, preaching. It was kind of like a Nazi doctrine, basically, a kind of nationalist, xenophobic doctrine, which is absolutely nothing to do with what the Buddha was talking about, as far as I understand it. So I hope that answers your question. Yeah. So just in terms of the practice this week, it's really about enriching your imagination. So imagination is a quality. It's the best word we have for it, but we do have the ability as human beings to kind of reach out beyond ourselves. So for most of us, the most characteristic expression of this in our lives will be through the arts. It'll be through art, you know, visual art, or through literature, or through music, or through theatre, that will feel as a human being that we've touched on something which is universal, some truth which is universal. So it's really worth spending a bit of time just trying to enrich your imagination. So again, like I was saying a minute ago, just following up your interests. So for example, if you got something out of that Ted Hughes poem, you might not have, and that's fine as well. We'll read a few of Ted Hughes' other poems. You know, there's amazing amount of stuff online. You know, you can actually listen to Ted reading that poem, which is really quite something to hear. So just if you find something interesting, just follow it up. Like there's the poems in the book. If one of them you liked, well, you might look up other poems by that writer and see if you can just follow up your lines of interest. Maybe challenge yourself a bit. So rather than going just to the latest Hollywood blockbuster, try and look at a film that's maybe a little bit more challenging, a little bit less obvious, but might stimulate some sort of reflection that will take you a little bit deeper into things. Galleries are all opening on Monday. I know, so you can actually go in and look at a bit of art. One of the things I was thinking about this is, in the same way that you make a date to see a friend, it can be quite good to make a date to spend some time doing this. So you might decide, you know, might put it in your diary on, you know, I don't know, Thursday afternoon or a Saturday morning, that you're going to sit down and listen to some music. I think I say that because a lot of us just have music on. We don't really sit down and listen to it. You know, we put something on and we have it in the background and then we get on with our whatever we're doing. We don't actually really pay attention to it. It's just on in the background. So that's one thing we could do, is actually sit down and listen to music. In the old days, you know, when you listen to music, you actually had to go over to the record player and pull the record out of the sleeve and put it on the record player and put the needle on the record. And then halfway through, you had to turn it over to listen to the other side. So I think that ritual of putting the record on cleaning it and maybe dusting off the stylus on the record player, it kind of meant that you're a little bit more attentive to the music when it came out of the speakers. But now it's so easy, you can just flick through a minute, you can literally, like, recently I joined Spotify, and you could just got access to absolutely anything you want to listen to, basically. All of the major popular strands, or even not that popular strands of music, are on there, so you can just do anything. So it's almost like we need to actually consciously and deliberately engage with something rather than just let it all kind of flow past. So so that's the first thing this week, is just to try and enrich your imagination. Spend some time in nature. And again, it's easier to get out and about now, get out into the hills and so on, and just appreciate the natural world. It's sort of, in a way, we're still, even though we live in cities, a lot of us, we're still kind of natural organisms. We're natural creatures. That the images and feelings that are deepest in us are aroused by natural images and natural things. So it's really worth just spending time in nature, just appreciating the sky and the greenness and the trees and the rivers and so on, the animals, the birds. So spending some time in nature. And then thirdly, with the meditation, just connecting with the imagination. So I offered a way of possibly doing that when we did the meditation earlier. It might be at the beginning. So many of us, have made a commitment to Buddhism, would recite the refuges and precepts. So actually say, to the Buddha for refuge I go, to the Dharma for refuge I go, to the Sangha for refuge I go, and then recite the 5 precepts. Loving kindness, generosity, contentment, truthfulness, and awareness. So we might actually do that. You might also chant a mantra, or maybe a poem. I know Maitreya Bandhu, who wrote this book, I know before he meditates, he likes to read a few poems. Just kind of, again, going back to what you were saying earlier, Francis, kind of breaking up the pattern of recurring thought. So sometimes I sort of feel like it's quite a good idea to stick a bit of a spanner in the works, of our reactive mind and sort of reactive patterns. So those are the 3 things. I'll just share them on the screen. I've got a few questions. So enrich your imagination, spend some time in nature, and meditation, connect with the imagination. So I'll just see what, so those are the 3 things for this week. Enriching your imagination, spend some time in nature, and connect with the imagination and meditation. John's posted a link to that mantra. Thanks for doing that, John. Mahasukha, you could look up him. He's got another version of that mantra. There's different versions of it. Thanks for sharing that, guys. I just wanted to mention, just before we finish, I wanted to mention the fact that next week we've got 2 courses starting. So as you'll be aware, this is the second to last session for this course. It does actually say in one part of the book that there's a week 9. That's a typo. So there isn't a week 9. There's just 8 weeks. So if you wanted to pick up another course, we've got 2 starting next week, so there'll be a bit of an overlap. But I'd really strongly encourage you to think about continuing if you found these explorations helpful. Giving a bit of shape to your practice by coming to a weekly session, I think, is really valuable. So the first course is called How to Live in a World on Fire, and it's exploring Buddhist ethics. So we've talked a bit about Buddhist ethics, but this is going into it in much more depth. I just mentioned the precepts a moment ago. So if you're interested in what Buddhist ethics is, and how do you have an ethical system in the absence of God, for example? So that starts on Tuesday. It's 6 weeks long with Vajrashura, and then again on Wednesday the 1st, this coming Wednesday, the 1st of July, 10:30 a.m. to 12:15 p.m. on Wednesday morning, is a 5-week course on meditation. So deepening your meditation. It's called Going Deeper in Meditation. There's also Wednesday night. So every Wednesday from 7:30 until about 9:15, we have a drop-in class where there'll be some meditation, some Dharma input, some opportunity to discuss. So that's every Wednesday. And then Daniel was asking for me to remind you about our social media. So we're on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram. And if you search for Dublin Buddhist Centre, you'll find us there. Just to remind you that, I've mentioned it before, just to remind you that if you want to make a donation, we'd be very happy to receive one. We're doing all of our events by donation at the moment. And I'll look forward to seeing you next week, which will be the last week of this 8-week course. And it won't be the end of the journey unless we're all awakened, which some of us might be, who knows. But anyway, we'll see you all next week.